Howdy folks, and you're listening to the Speak Up podcast, your number one topical discussion podcast surrounding all things mental health. I'm your host Ashley, and today in episode 2 I'll be talking about two different topics. In the first topic I'll be talking about what keeps anxiety and depression going, as well as other like psychiatric illnesses as well. So I'll be talking about that, what keeps it going. And in the second part of the episode, I'll be talking about the public versus private sector in terms of mental health care. Alright, so in this case, I'll be talking about private versus NHS care within mental health, in a mental health context. The pros and the cons of that. Disadvantages and the advantages, because as someone that's had both experience in the private sector and the NHS, I think you'll find it quite informative, and there'll be people out there listening that are wondering whether they should pay out of their own pocket for healthcare in regards to mental health. And I'll be sharing my opinion on that. And whether it's worth it, and all the rest of it, and my own personal opinion. So it won't be a blame game, as I've said before. I've said this before. I'm not here to slate individuals or services or anything like that. It's mainly just open dialogue and discussion around, what I think, and do with that what you will. I'm hoping that some people will be listening, and it may actually help some people, So I'll be talking about that. I'll be talking about how to get a therapist in the private sector, the ways to find one, the recommendations, and how it's different from the NHS. Now, I should mention, in the first section, I'll be talking about, as I've said, anxiety and depression and what keeps it going, and they're called cognitive distortions. So that's a psychological term. So it's psychology jargon, really, which I won't use too much of. But basically, what they are distorted thinking patterns, and that's the kind of basis by which most mental illnesses are consistent, across time. That's the reason why they're maintained, and that's the reason why anxiety and depression is such a constant in our lives, because of the thoughts that we think and the distorted views that we have. As I said before in a previous episode, our thoughts and our feelings aren't always reality, aren't always the objective reality, and sometimes when we've got distorted thinking patterns and feelings and thoughts, they're what keep it going. But I'll talk more about that in episode 2 in the first half. And as I've said, second half I'll be talking about public versus private. Alright, so that's what I'll talk about. And just as a little disclaimer, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a medical professional, I'm not a mental health specialist at all. I'm just a service user of the NHS and of the private sector with my own lived experiences of mental health, and I'm hoping that in sharing my opinion I'm going to help people, but also please don't take my word as gospel. Now, I'm not saying I'm wrong, but it's informational only, this podcast. I'm not giving you medical advice, but it is quite likely that what I say is factual, but always consult your doctor at your convenience, before acting on any content in this podcast. So that's it, folks. I hope it's going to be useful for you. I'm quite excited to be recording it. I look forward to having you on episode 2 and listening to the podcast. If you'd like to be on the podcast in future episodes, you can email me at thespeakuppodcast22@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook on our Facebook page, the Speak Up Podcast. So that's all, folks, but you take care, and bye-bye for now.